All right, Twitch. It is Monday night, and that means it is time for us here at Green Oaks Gaming to go on our journey of exploring game worlds and creating content in game worlds and interacting with that game world or worlds that we're creating. So in the past few weeks, we have been building out the first tier of a new campaign designed to run from levels 1 to 20. So the first tier is all completed. We explored the kind of setup and area to establish a tier 2 for that campaign. Tonight we'll be diving into that tier 2 world and looking at what that means for us when we start building out the encounters in this environment. So we really set the stage by looking at the area that we want to have our adventurers travel to and building in kind of the aspects of what's going on in the world at large. So we can set the stage, show that there are people that are being affected and how that is going to play in on their adventuring life moving forward. So tier 1 was really about party dynamics, establishing party dynamics, and getting them focused on working and adventuring together as a group. Tier 2, we start making them have an impact on the realm itself. So for our tier 2, if we look at the process of what we're building, and I know it's a little more challenging to see on this screen here, but we know that this is going to cover levels 5 to 10. We know we're going to be introducing a villain named Drethel, who wants the bountiful cornucopia by the winter solstice. He's having a hard time getting it using Underdark brutes because of the Guardians of the Fields, who are there to prevent capture of the cornucopia. So we've got some parts already established. We know that as the town was sucked in, the villains were unable to acquire the bountiful cornucopia, and that was the prize they were after when they attacked the city and pulled it into rubble, into a sinkhole in the ground. And the Guardians of the Fields have sown rumors as to where the bountiful cornucopia is in different temples and different areas. So because of the information they had provided through legends and lore, the villains, let's say, took the wrong avenue and are now still searching for that bountiful cornucopia. So the theme that we want to explore is knowledge versus ignorance. So knowledge is going to come into an important factor in this tier. The adventurers should, through this tier, be able to find out more about all of the parts in this premise, in this story. They should start finding out who Drethel is, because we're going to introduce them, but we're not going to let them fight. Or if we are, we're going to make sure that it's extremely one-sided, which sounds very railroady, I grant you, but I want Drethel to be an ongoing villain, so I don't want it to be a one-hit wonder of a villain. I don't want it to be even a deadly encounter. I want it to be something to where the party cannot make, at this point, a good stand against Drethel or attack Drethel and defeat him, because if we did, then our story would end and we can't make it to level 20. Or we would have to completely change gears, and the way we're writing this campaign is designed with a start, a middle, and an end, following a basic backbone. So I want to have Drethel be kind of off limits, you might say. Now, the bountiful cornucopia, up until this point, the players and their characters should not know much about the bountiful cornucopia. I don't want this to be any type of a MacGuffin at all. I am actually going to be creating this item, statting it in the whole 9 yards, so that it is actually a wondrous magical item that the players can learn more about. And that's, again, what I want this aspect to be about. They need to find out what this bountiful cornucopia is and why it's wanted so much by these villains. And then the winter solstice, so we should be able to establish some type of a timeline. Remember, when we started this adventure, we started it in very early spring, late winter, early spring. So we kind of give a roadmap of time allotment. We don't want this to end and be, again, just over in a week. I want to stretch this out. I don't want this tier to feel too tight on time. I don't want them to go from adventure to adventure to adventure. I want to build in downtime in between these adventuring days. So winter solstice gives us a good long time before the kind of conclusion of this aspect of it. And then ultimately, if the villain does not get the bountiful cornucopia by the winter solstice, we're still going to carry them through and forward. That's just the information that the character should learn, should have them know that there is a deadline to this aspect. And we'll get to that when we get to adventuring days, why that's so important. Now, the Guardians of the Fields, we definitely want some support. This is going to be in the form of NPCs, and particularly more legends and lore. So NPCs will have a big aspect. So we'll have to kind of create the Guardians of the Fields. Who are they? What are they doing? And why are they doing it? Kind of, and why isn't it overly popular knowledge? Why don't the characters know about it? We need to make this something that through discovery of knowledge, the characters can warm up to and get behind and support. And then the Underdark Brutes, that is kind of the placeholder we threw in there. I know that I want to bring them into cavernous regions underground and do more dungeon delving in this tier. Remember, in the first tier, we had them kind of moving about the town in a couple of ways, and they were adventuring, kind of delving pieces with the canals, with the sewers, with the forest, with the goblin caverns. But this is hardcore dungeon delving, because in this tier, the adventuring leveling prospect requires multi-day adventures. 2.1 days, 2.3 days, 2.2 days. Now remember, this is just an adventure. 2.3 days, 2.1 days, and 2.2 days. Now, I received an email asking about how do we justify this in terms of, so the example they used was Lord of the Rings, which is a fantastic series, whether you're looking at the books or the movies. I liked them both. With Frodo and the Fellowship of the Ring, when they go on an adventure, it's a lot more than 2.1 days. It's a lot more than 2.3 days, right? They spend a long time on their adventure, even after the break of the Fellowship, and you've got kind of two teams going different directions. It's a lot more than just a couple of days of adventuring. My caveat to that isn't Dungeons and Dragons. That's literature and storytelling for the sake of storytelling. This is a role-playing game, which does have aspects of it that are a little bit more game mechanically designed. So we can't follow suit of the Lord of the Rings and have a multi-month adventure to fill in gaining that 1 or 2 levels. That would kind of equate to Lord of the Rings. That was definitely a great question that I received, and I had to think about it a little bit before I put my answer together, but that is why, because that is literature. This, we're working on game mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons. So I hope that answers your question. Pardon me. All right, so knowledge versus ignorance here is the biggest thing. And that isn't really the best way to put it. I wouldn't say that the characters per se are ignorant. They're just not aware or knowledgeable about some of these aspects of this story that we're telling. And the way I think about it is, if you take any published material, any published adventure, let's say Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, when the setup kind of is going in place, the characters aren't familiar with all of the aspects of the game. They're going to 10 towns for their own various reasons, right? But ultimately, the thing they have to uncover and learn about is, why is Ariel making the situation in Icewind Dale this forever night, right? That's kind of the goal. It's a knowledge piece. So they're having to learn and explore to understand and then ultimately overcome. So it's kind of the same premise. It's gaining knowledge into the aspects of their adventure. So that's kind of the premise that we're going to be doing. We've got the area set up. We've established that. Now we want to start breaking in and looking at the aspects of these games. So to do that, I'm going to pull some of my materials and look at what kind of things we need to explore and take under consideration as we start building these adventures out. So Golden Vale, the location that the characters initially are tasked with going, has sunken. We have established what the area looks like. The city is now in ruin and rumble in the bottom of a sinkhole. There are NPCs there who are trying to gather up what resources they can before heading out to all different directions away from the Golden Vale. And there are some type of creatures that are coming out and attacking them and kind of digging through the rubble and everything. So knowing that we've got 2.1 days and kind of establishing that 0.1, or I rounded it up to 0.25, knowing that we've got those type of adventures that we're initially looking at doing across the rubble field to the cavern, that allows us an opportunity to set up our big bad of Drethel and utilize that type of adventuring day. Ultimately, we know that in this tier, we do have a breakdown for our party who is going to be starting at the 5th level. We have a breakdown that tells us what the encounter should be for easy, medium, hard, and deadly based on CR rating. And again, this is by design, balanced with rules as written, magic allotment and magic item disbursement, and all of that. Of course, if we're granting up any additional magic items or anything, we need to adjust our CR ratings accordingly. But based on that information, we can then go through and get a couple of adventuring day sheets. Again, we know we're going to have again, I rounded it up, 2.25 adventuring days that we're going to do. Now, I'm not going to fill these out all while we're on camera today, because the first thing I want to look at is making sure that for this adventure, we've got a good solid plan of attack. And to help me do that, I'm going to turn right to our source materials. And I've gotten a few here. I've got Volos, I've got Monsters, the Multiverse, I've got the Monster Manual, but I also pulled the Dungeon Master's Guide. So going through these, I thought we would start out in the Monster Manual, in the appendix, just like we have before. So bear with me here. And look at some of the miscellaneous creatures. The reason I always want to start here is because I want to look at, for the campaign, first and foremost, are there any creatures that really speak to me as, I think of it almost like the way I think of traps. Are there any creatures that I need to make sure represent the environment? It's their natural environment before I get into things like the Underdark brutes, the villains that are being sent out by Drethel. So for me, this is an important aspect to start, because are there any things here that really make sense to have in this tier, and why? So going through a lot of these, I'm just going to quickly scan and see, are there things that really makes sense. And on my adventure sheet, I'm just going to write a couple of them on the back as possibilities. So we know we're going to be underground in caverns. Ones that come to mind right off the bat. Right off the bat. Black bears not so much. Blink dogs, so they are from the Fae. Bloodhawk boar, brown bear, camel cat. Not a whole lot in here. Oh, maybe a giant centipede. So for me, as I look at easy encounters, this is a way to fill up some of those easy encounters, and again, just present more of the feeling of the underground. I don't want to have them just facing creatures of the Underdark. I want them to come across some natural areas with natural predators or creatures to interact with. Let's see here. Just looking at, oh yeah. Oh, I suppose I should write down, I'm going to go back and write down the CR rating of these just so I have them. So as I'm looking at the chart, I can quickly and easily see how many I would need to do an encounter with. Hyenas, killer whales. And then I'll put swarms, and I'll put bats, spiders, insects. And into the ends here, I think we're good. So that gives me, it's not a lot, but it is 4 opportunities to just have creatures that are kind of mundane, I would say. Even though they're not. I mean, bats, giant centipedes, things like giant spiders, fantastical for sure, but more mundane compared to what we generally present our roster of characters. Now with that, I'm going to pull out the DM's guide, and this is where our initial appendixes come in handy for looking at the monster lists. Try to make sure that gets on screen really well. All by environment. So this is a good list that I always try to use as much as possible. Here are Underdark monsters. You could also use some of the other ones, such as the hill monsters and the mountain monsters, if they fit, if they're more like in the mountains, but using caves and things like that for homes. But the Underdark is really where I want to focus on. And they do have some that I kind of passed up, things like giant fire beetles. I suppose that could make sense. But this is a great list that we can start building out some of our foes. And this is going to be the primary aspect that I use before kind of fleshing those out a little bit further. So we know we've got 2.1 days, that 0.1, or again, I rounded up to 0.25. I'm going to save that for either pre or post getting into the cavern itself. But in the meantime, I am going to go through and pop in the details, the theme of this adventure, right? This is the level 5 to get them up to level 6 adventure is knowledge. versus ignorance. Again, not the best descriptor for that type of adventure that I want to do, but I'm keeping with it just for consistency. And then environment, this is underground. Party level is level 5. Adventuring days is 2.1, and I round that up to 2.25. And this is the 1 of 2.25. And then considerations. What considerations do I want to have? I want to have 2 considerations. So the first one is led by Drethel. And then the second one is unnatural versus natural. So for me, that aspect is this city that was brought into the sinkhole was not due to a natural sinkhole. This was due to a concerted effort of the villains trying to get to the temple and retrieve this cornucopia, this wondrous item. I want the underground environment that my characters are going to be adventuring in to feel primarily unnatural, but I want them to come across a couple of natural aspects in this adventure. Thus why pulling some of those kind of natural creatures to set up some easy encounters, because I want that kind of interchanging, but I want the primary focus of this to be unnatural. They should learn and get that knowledge that this is not a natural phenomenon. This is a concerted effort. It's unnatural, and it's by design that this is going on. The villains who are after this cornucopia, ultimately the characters through these adventures should learn this is not just a natural phenomenon. This is a concerted effort that we need to be concerned with. So that's something I really want to keep in mind for not only the creatures, but also the environment as I start mapping it out. So starting to think about the first adventuring day. This is the first full adventuring day. I don't want to have a deadly encounter at all. I want this to be a process. I want this to be a full day underground. And I actually want to stretch it out. I don't want to think of it just being an 8-hour workday. I want to stretch this out. What are the limits that my characters are willing to do before they have to stop and rest? Because I want them to be underground. I'm hoping that they will not look to punch the clock, so to say, and at 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever to punch the clock. I want them to utilize the full array of time possible to get this adventure, this day's adventure done. With that being said, I'm not going to make it to where they get exhaustion from being up so late underground. I just want to have it be very tenuous, that there's no sun and sundials for them to be able to tell the time, though some characters may be able to tell what time it is. But I want them to feel like they can keep going and keep going and keep going until, bam, that's it. We're at the end of the day. We need to stop. We need to take a long rest, even though we're in this underground complex. I want to make it challenging enough that they feel challenged, but not so challenging that they don't feel too safe to take a long rest. Again, I want the characters to succeed. I want the characters to be successful in their adventuring days, but I also want to manage the time, which is why we set out that hard and fast piece that they're going to find out through the tier, that there is a hard and fast date that they need to get moving on these adventures. That way we still manage and maintain the narrative. So I do want to have, boy, do I want to have a hard, yes, I do want to have at least one hard adventure, and I'm going to put that kind of in the middle. So I'm going to take these bad boys out. So I'm going to have one hard. I'm going to start out with a medium and go to a couple of easies, and then a hard, I'm just going to reverse it. And then a couple of easies, and then a medium. That's going to be our adventuring day. That's going to be what we present to our characters. So going through some of the easy pieces, I have on here some aspects that are kind of natural, a natural world. Looking at my chart of what the challenges are for the adventuring party, I can quickly and easily see, is it going to make sense? So this is where kind of the rubber hits the road. So for instance, our giant centipede, which I love the thought of giant centipedes underground, we're at 1/4. So 1/4, our characters are going to be level 5. That would mean they would need to face 14 giant centipedes for an easy encounter. 14 giant centipedes. Could be a little challenging to do. 14 centipedes. I mean, that seems like a ton. It seems like a whole ton. But it could also be kind of fun. It could be pretty fun where they've got all these massive amounts of centipedes moving out into these now constructed tunnels from this little cave environment. Do I want to put my characters through it? Yeah, why not? Why not? So one of these, we are going to do 14 giant centipedes. And this is a CR of 1/4. Why not? It's fun. Think of all of the call-outs I can do to creep out my players by talking about all these hundreds of legs skittering on the stone out from the walls of this cavern. And there I can kind of tie in this unnatural to the natural environment. And because of this unnaturalness, these centipedes are now swarming out from the environment and absolutely giving them all kinds of grief. So it doesn't mean they have to defeat them. They can do lots of different things to avoid a conflict. They don't have to fight these centipedes, but I want them to encounter the centipedes for sure. And whether they work on avoiding them, whether they work on putting up some type of a wall of fire to steer them in a different, whatever the case may be, they don't have to combat these giant centipedes, but it is going to be an encounter, and it's going to be a creepy one at that. Should be a pretty good spoiler warning if you play some of my campaigns, how I like to play. I like to put some of those creepy things in there. So something to think about in your session 0, right? What kind of questions are you going to ask your GM? That may be one of them. What kind of creepy things are you going to put in there, because I hate it. So there's already one easy one. And then for the other kind of easy, I've got 3 more that I want to fill out. I got to think, do I want bats? Do I want giant centipedes, giant spiders, or swarms? I'm really not feeling any of those. So I'm going to wait on those for right now. So as we look at our list of Underdark monsters, I want to go through here and just pick a few out that, again, just kind of speak a little bit to me. And I'm going to write those on my paper here just so I can kind of pick and choose what I want to do. Now, some of this is going to be driven by Drethel. I want them, again, to encounter Drethel pretty quickly on, and I'm going to use the medium encounter to do that. So I'm already thinking of thugs that Drethel is going to be directing right there. And then as the characters happen upon them, he's going to tell these creatures to take care of these adventurers, basically, and then move away. I want him to have a strong indication, a strong introduction, and really make him be a part of this first venture, this first encounter, so that he is present right away, and I can really talk him up and then pull him back and have him be a little bit here and there, each adventure moving forward for a build-up. I want a strong build-up of Drethel. So with that being said, let's go through our list and just pick out a couple of creatures that could make good encounters. Now, I do like the giant fire beetle. Some of these other ones, like the Shriekers and the Myconid, I want to wait until they're deeper than this. So I don't want to put those in yet. The Sturge are pretty good, but I've already used them. Drow I like. And there's my giant centipedes. I do like troglodytes. Dark mantles could be good later. I like using oozes and slimes, but I'm going to wait. Piercers could be good. Rust Monster could be good. Let's see. I do like carrion crawlers. Hook horrors. Coatilla I could do, but I'd want to explore them later. I've got an idea kind of already for that as the party gets lower in. A veteran, right? We're talking about hired hands, kind of. Let's do a Drow Elite. Let's do an Earth Elemental. That makes a lot of sense. Let's do a Salamander. Let's do an Umber Hulk. I like using Zorn, but I'm going to wait on that. I'm going to pop in here Driders. And then let's see, based on our piece, the highest we'll go is going to be, well, that's a deadly. The highest we go for a hard is 10. So we're good yet. We're good yet. We can do a Drow Mage. I'm going to not do Mind Flayers yet. We could do a Fire Giant. And yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that list. I'm feeling pretty good about that list. So I'm going to go back here and pop on those CR ratings again. So I've got them ready to go. That's a 1/4. So 1/2. It's 1/2. 1/2. So 2. 2. No, that's a 3. 3. Well, we went up here pretty quick. That's a 6. 7 and a 9. All right. So now that we've got a good list here, we can go through and finish these out, thinking about that medium encounter that we want to really start out and set up the kind of I want this to be a medium challenge, and I want to really set the stage that Drethel is commanding some more powerful operatives. And so I'm going to go kind of higher on the list here, and using my chart, if we went with, let's just say, a fire giant. No, that's a little too difficult. So let's go with let's see here. Let's go with 3 veterans. And then to stat these out, we can make these veterans be drow. They don't have to be these statted drow that are 1/4. These could be veteran drow fighters who are obviously well trained, they're more knowledgeable, they're more experienced. These are veterans and will be a more challenging aspect for our player characters. So these veterans, and I'm going to put in parentheses drow with a question mark. Maybe they won't be. Maybe they will be something completely different who are coordinating attacks out there. But that is going to be our first medium encounter. And in here, I want to put directed by Drethel. Now, an easy encounter, we want to pop up, and I am going to do, again, I want this to be after the giant centipedes. I want this to be something to bring them back into the unnatural aspect of these caverns. So we are going to do, if we do if we do 1 drow elite, and this could be bringing info to veterans. Maybe checking up on the veterans. Why haven't they come back and reported yet? Because the adventurers hopefully took care of them, right? So this will be a drow elite. Will also be an easy one. So this one here, I'm going to put a star by it. I want them to get information. At some point, I want them to gain information about the plot to steal the cornucopia. And I want to use one of these as breadcrumbs to start getting them to think of looking at other places they could adventure after this adventure to thwart the aspect of the bad guys getting the bountiful cornucopia, or just looking to get Drethel. So we'll set up some aspects for them to get this breadcrumb trail. So then we're going into a hard encounter. At level 5, that means we are going to be bringing in a couple of CR5, which could be 2 earth elementals, could be pretty fun. Very hard, of course. Or 2 salamanders. Or a fire giant. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I've got a party of 6. So the 1 versus 6 is a lot more challenging for me to justify. So I actually am going to go with 2. And I am going to use Earth Elementals rather than just the Earth kind of rising up and being these creatures. I'm actually going to have them sentries who are guarding and protecting the path. Maybe I will start them holding up like rafters. They're not holding up rafters, but they're the rafters of this cavern, or they're carved to look like the rafters. But these golems, upon the characters entering in, will determine that they are foes and attack. So 2 Earth Elementals is going to be challenging. It is going to be a hard encounter for my characters, especially when I start them out kind of on opposite ends of the room and have them move in. So it will be a hard encounter for a party of 6. And again, it should not be deadly, but it should be pretty challenging. So then we're going to move back into some easy encounters. And for that, let's go with I'm going to bring back in some more kind of, I hate to use the word natural, but more naturally. I could send 10 rust monsters is an easy encounter for level 5 characters. 10 rust monsters, that's insanity. I don't hate my players enough to do that, because you could really do some damage and decimate their dreams and hopes and gear with a rust monster. Then again, it could be a lot of fun to see them panic and run. I'm leaning either that way or to dark mantles. Rust monsters or dark mantles. Boy, rust monsters could be a lot of fun. But at the same time, it's 10 of them. 10 of them. I'm not that cruel. I'm not that cruel. Let's go with, instead of that, let's go with let's go with an Umber Hulk. That's still not great, but it's 1 versus 6, so they shouldn't feel overwhelmed by it. Kind of the natural environment and everything, I think it plays into it pretty well, so I'm feeling okay about that. And then for the next one, I want to get back into kind of the more challenging aspects, so we're going to go with medium, and let's look at, let's go with for that medium, that final medium, what are we going to coup de grace the day with? What are we going to cap them on? Hook horrors. That'll be the last natural aspect. And should lead them in a way to find shelter. Again, what I want to do is have them end the day with a good medium challenging combat and then feel secure where they're resting. So I'm going to utilize the hook horrors to kind of guide them into an aspect where they feel they've got something that is not explored and is a natural aspect of the environment. So that means this final easy one, I want to have that be an aspect that is more man-made. And for that, I am going to send in, let's send in some, drow. So we are going to do 10 drow. And these drow are looking for or waiting on elite. So one aspect of this is, again, I don't expect combat out of this. All of the encounters that we create as GMs, they don't have to be counter-focused. They don't have to be based on just combat. So this one here already I'm getting ideas in that this is the kind of party that is accompanying our Drow elite. They are waiting for this Drow elite who was sent to check on the veterans. They are just waiting for that Drow to return. Maybe it's a retinue, maybe it is some type of an aspect of that Drow. So this is another opportunity for diplomacy and maybe subterfuge and spying to take root and allow for some more interesting encounter aspects. It does not have to be combat, it could be, but if we set this up correctly, these encounters do not all have to be combat, especially if we're looking at condensing our day. We don't want just combat back to back to back to back. I don't, anyhow, in my stories. Some GMs and players may really like that and appreciate that, but not, oh, my light, what's going on? Not everybody does. So for us to look at this as an opportunity for some type of other outcome, I think is really good. So these Drow are waiting for the Drow elite who is en route to get why the veterans are not reporting in to Drethel. So it all kind of ties this adventuring day together. We go with an unnatural thing where the party should find that these are hired hands that don't belong in these caverns. They're here for a reason. They spot Drethel and they have this interaction with the primary villain, even if it's just visually. As they're going through, they realize there's some aspects of natural caverns in here, but this is cut straight through it and is upsetting the locals, so to say. We've got a Drow elite coming to check on them. Also should be a source of information and some type of aspect for them to gain some type of knowledge. We've got earth elementals who are standing guard in this unnatural cavern. These are unnatural creatures, and it should again provide information that there's something bigger going on here. We've got an Umber Hulk who is coming in based on all of these interactions so far. There is all kinds of stuff going on. The Umber Hulk is just after some food. We've got the Drow retinue waiting for the Drow elite, possibly another opportunity for information. And then we've got hook horrors, which as they come up or from the sides or however we set up this part of the cavern, we have got a good place for our characters to bed down for the night, rest, recuperate, and get their spell slots back and do a long rest to get some healing in. So thinking about that, how would I map this out? I've got this is the drop from the city ruins, right? Just the little bits of wall that are there. Here is the rubble. This is the cavern right in here. So the first adventure is going to be shortly within the cavern. And this is going to be the veterans who have some type of a station set up of plan of attack to get cornucopia. And then I want the adventurers to go down, and in here is a kind of a natural piece. They'll continue to go down. Here is a Drow who's coming up. Once they get to the bottom, that's going to be the challenging piece. This is the Earth Elemental. And then going down a little bit further, they're going to encounter an Umber Hulk. And then they're going to come to the waiting area with the Drow. And then in this waiting area, shortly after that, that's where the hooked horrors are going to come in from above or below or beside, whatever the case may be, and should have some type of an aspect that these are local here. They're not part of this path. They could be coming from an area that's more secure. Ultimately, that's what I want to do. I want to lead the characters into an area that's more secure. So one of our 2.1 adventuring days done. Now that we've started to map this out, I have a better idea in my mind about if we have that 0.25 adventuring day of the characters getting to the cavern as they're crossing the rubble. What kind of encounters are we going to build out there? I'm already thinking, sticking with the list, what are some aspects? And I'm really feeling that Drow set up the stage that there's something deeper and darker going on. If we have them encounter, whether the encounter is finding Drow in the rubble. I am also thinking that if we have an encounter there, it would probably be a hard. So for that aspect there, I would have a fire giant. So those are my top two for that 0.1 day if we have the adventure be across the rubble on the way into the cavern. If we have it out, then I want to look at this aspect, this aspect of leaving the adventuring area. What are they going to encounter on the way? And there I would say it would probably be something more natural, like I would probably then break it into 3 mediums, and I would have it be something a little more natural, like the dark mantles, piercers, and rust monsters. Why not? Have them flee from the rust monsters as the swarm of rust monsters breaks through an iron ore deposit in the caverns. That could be a lot of fun. So there is the beginnings of our 5th level adventure. We've got one more to do. I don't know that we'll save it for next week. I may just flesh it out and then we can recap it. But it's a good start already on how we want to populate the challenges, what type of aspects we want our characters to encounter. As we build out the 2nd day, the other thing we'll need to look at is the rewards and make sure that as we get into the 5th level, what type of magic items are we making sure that the characters are acquiring as they're going through and doing the adventure, aside from just the monetary treasure that we'll be assigning to each of these encounters. So they've already gotten quite a bit on the common and uncommon. I wouldn't say quite a bit of common, but some uncommon and very little bit of rare. So at this aspect, they'll still be getting common, they'll still be getting uncommon, they'll still be getting a little bit more rare. So again, they're going to be in this tier here getting the most amount of stronger magic items, and not as much this adventure, but this is kind of setting the precedence of rounding out the common items styles that we're going to be assigning in this adventure, because it is going to be pretty much themed based on the backbone that we're putting into the story. So that's day 1 adventure built. Still some work to do for the 2nd part of the day, and especially as we go through and look at how we want to kind of tie this piece in. Are we going to have them see Drethel again in the 2nd day of their adventure? How deep are they going to go, and what ultimately are we going to kind of keep enticing them to go further and further in? And I do think Drethel, if we properly introduce him at the beginning of this adventure, that's going to be a big piece. But then also the breadcrumbs we put with the Drow elite and the Drow and the veterans, leading them to get to the bottom of this cavern and really make it through both these adventuring days. That's where the kind of like light bulb moment is going to happen. We're going to end it with a very challenging encounter. I don't think that we're going to do a deadly encounter on this adventure. We may save that for the 6th level, but we'll probably have 2 hard encounters on that next day of adventure. Again, I don't want this to be just a complete overkill kind of piece. I want this to have a lot of opportunity for exploration and gaining knowledge. So the little bits of pepper that we can do here and there, I think, is going to be ideal. And leaning into what we've built here with things like the Drow, I think it gives that strong presence of we need to find out what's going on in the Underdark, how these Underdark creatures are being used by Drethel, what does Drethel have to do with the Underdark, and then ultimately find a way to link that to the Grey Wastes. And I think we can do that really well with some NPCs. Ultimately, I want to set the precedence that the players need to get into the Underdark. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on for this tier, is exploring the Underdark proper. So that's the goal, that's the premise, and I think we're starting to do that pretty well. Day 2, we'll do the same. We'll probably drop some troglodytes just to reinforce that they need to get into the Underdark in this tier, and then explore the Underdark as a region as well. So this is going to be a multi-part tier where the characters are going to be underground for possibly quite a while, and then as they come up from the Underdark, they should have a wealth of knowledge and be less ignorant as to what's going on and why. So at that point, they should be pushing for the other NPCs to really support their cause because they support theirs. They've got a shared commonality. So that is our journey for tonight, exploring these fantastic game worlds and looking at how we can continue to build a great story with lots of detail and lots of information. Next week we'll be diving in some more and continuing on this path of exploration and adventure building. We'll have the details for this level, this adventure complete, and we'll probably come up with a theme. This is when we'll really start naming the adventures, so to say. So we could do it with the first one, like cleaning the canals, into the sewers, things like that. This one here, I really start putting the focus on in my in my player updates, to where I kind of name the adventure. I give it a name so that they I want their mouth watering for what they're going to encounter. So that's kind of how I process this aspect of adventure building. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you happen to catch this show live, make sure you give us a follow. We're looking at gaining followers so we can continue to develop our algorithm and get in front of more people who might find this content beneficial, fun, and enjoyable. And we're looking for interactions. Leave comments. Let us know what you think. Reach out to us on all our social medias. If you're following us on any of our other social medias, such as YouTube, please be sure to check out our live Twitch shows when you can. We have a very set schedule. Check it out anytime. Now, I will say our schedule will be updating 2 weeks from tonight. We're going to be moving back from 6:30 Central Standard Time. So watch for the announcements on all of our social medias. We're only going to have 2 more weeks where we're starting our streams on the weeknights at 6:30. Then we're going to be moving those back. So that way we can accommodate a few more people's schedules throughout the U.S. Until our next show Wednesday, when we're creating a fantastic character, make sure to check out what we're coming up with for craziness, and let me know your thoughts if you want to see us do a monster or a PC. Last time we did something really fun and wacky. Check it out on our YouTube. It's premiering on Wednesday on YouTube, so it should be a lot of fun. Until then, have a great evening. Bye-bye.